Hi everyone. In this video, we'll take a look at a sample employee versus self-employed problem by assessing the information presented in the narrative, analyzing the evidence supporting each test, and concluding on the status of the individual. Before we perform our analysis, I'll read through the narrative with you. Due to the poor economy, Davies Limited, an architectural firm, has instituted a freeze in hiring. However, the company wants to engage the services of a specific architect, N. Capwell, to manage the completion of a specific project over a 2-year period. Following negotiations between the parties, a consulting contract was signed. Ms. Capwell will be paid $4,000 a month to work at least 14 days in the month for a 2-year period. The agreement stipulates that Davies Limited will provide Ms. Capwell with an office and pay for underground parking at Davies Limited. Ms. Capwell supplies her own architectural tools and has other architectural clients at the same time. She estimates that she derives approximately 30% of her consulting income from these other clients. So the required here is for us to analyze this information and express an opinion as to whether Ms. Capwell would be considered an employee or a self-employed independent contractor. To tackle this type of problem, we analyze each applicable test one by one and list any evidence that supports the arguments either for or against employee status. So we'll start with the control test. Supporting the argument that Ms. Capwell is an employee are the facts that she's required to work 14 days a month, so the employer tells her when to work, and the fact that she must work at the office provided. The employer tells her where to work. Arguments supporting the fact that she is self-employed are the fact that outside of the 14 days that she's required to work, the time is pretty flexible, so she can do the work anytime she wants within that month-long period. She also has time to work on other projects during the time where she's not working specifically for the company. She also decides how the work that she's going to do is done. So nobody is sort of standing over her and micromanaging her. She gets to make the decisions on how she applies her architectural skills. Now you want to sum up with a conclusion here, and in this case I'd say there's arguments going both ways, but I'd say there's slightly stronger arguments supporting the independent contractor status. Keep in mind that there's no evidence here regarding Ms. Capwell's ability to hire subcontractors, so we don't make any assumptions one way or the other and say yes she can or no she can't. I mean, she might be able to, she might not be able to, we just don't know. And you can't state assumptions like that and include them as part of your analysis. Next, we'll take a look at the ownership of tools test. The fact that Davies Limited provides an office and parking for Ms. Capwell lends support to the argument that she may be an employee. The fact that she provides all of the other tools, including her own specific architectural knowledge, strongly supports the fact that she may be self-employed. Again, when we go to conclude on this specific test, it's kind of ambiguous because there's some arguments either way, but I think that there's a slightly stronger argument for her being an independent contractor here. The third test that we take a look at when we're determining whether or not Ms. Capwell's an employee or self-employed is whether or not she incurs the risk of any losses or has the chance to profit on this particular job. Now, we know that she earns her fee regardless of her performance, so in that sense, we can kind of think about her as an employee. She's almost getting a salary here. Arguments the other way are the fact that this monthly fee is fixed. There's nothing in the contract that stipulates that Ms. Capwell will be reimbursed for any of her expenses, so if she incurs expenses that exceed $4,000, she may in fact incur a loss. As far as a conclusion goes here, I mean, it depends on what you think. I'm looking at this evidence and I think to myself, it's kind of ambiguous. I don't know if I could decide one way or the other. Keep in mind, in a scenario like this, you're welcome to conclude either for employee or self-employed, or you can come up with the conclusion that you don't have a conclusion. The idea behind performing 4 tests instead of just one is that we take a look at the evidence at the end, all in conjunction, and make a decision based on all of the evidence, not just one test. The fourth and final test we'll consider is the integration test, in which we determine just how integral the individual is to the business. In this particular case, Ms. Capwell earns 70% of her income from this contract, which suggests she could have a high level of economic dependence on Davis Limited. If she were to lose this contract, she'd be down to 30% of her income, and it's difficult to say whether or not that Davis Limited could be easily replaced. Now, in the other corner, the arguments for the fact that she's self-employed are the idea that the contract is only signed for a specific period of time. At the end of the 2 years, there's no indication that Ms. Capwell will be necessarily kept on. In all likelihood, she's not specifically integral to the business, as her work could probably be replaced by some other architect. As far as a conclusion goes here, I think there's slightly stronger evidence for the self-employed contractor status, so I would side with that. So in problems such as this, it's extremely important to provide a strong conclusion, indicating whether you think this individual is more likely an employee or a self-employed independent contractor. The results of the test don't always provide us with a definitive answer as to whether or not they should be viewed as an employee or not. However, they can help guide us towards making that determination, and you need to make a decision either way. In this case, the facts lead toward the independent contractor conclusion, so you should state that definitively. So how should you best lay out a problem like this in order to get the maximum marks? Well, you're welcome to lay out your analysis just like the walkthrough that we did previously in the video, but the layout that I show here on this slide would be a really ideal and comprehensive way to show your analysis and your results. Anytime you can use a table to clearly display results, especially when deciding between options, I'd highly recommend that you do so. While it does look busy on this slide, if you show it in Word or Excel, anyone who's reviewing your work can clearly follow every argument for each individual test and determine how well you know the material. To put it very simply, if you use this format, you're likely going to get way better marks. So when you're responding to problems like these, it's well worth noting that in some instances there just may not be enough clear evidence to support an employment status one way or the other. In questions like this, it's important to follow that process that we went through and ultimately make a decision one way or the other with support from your analysis. Never sit on the fence, as I've stated before. Usually, I'm not actually looking for a specific answer in these things, but rather I'm evaluating the process that you use to come to your conclusion. Again, as I've stated before, no one's going to pay you money to sit on the fence and tell them that 100% of their options are still options. You need to be decisive and provide a conclusion.